What's up, guys? This is Dalton Mack with Path to Pilot, and if you've been considering becoming a pilot and don't know how, this video is for you. Today, I'm going to walk you through the steps on what you need to do to start your journey, how to pick a school, what going through school looks like to get your ratings. After that, building hours and finding a job, and then from there, hopefully becoming an airline pilot. So there's a long journey. There's a lot of steps involved, but if this is a career path you've been considering, I'm going to walk you through those steps today and make it just as easy as I can for you. Now, I just left my cushy corporate job of 9 years to pursue a path in aviation about 6 months ago, and I figure my story is pretty relevant to a lot of aviators I talk to out there that are also, starting that career 2.0, right? Looking for a new, better path, following their dreams, looking for something maybe higher paying or a better quality of life or whatever the reason is. But that being said, there are a lot of people out there who don't know what to do, how to start in aviation. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through all of that. Before I jump in, there is no better time to become a pilot. Currently, airlines are hiring at some of the lowest hours they have ever done in the history of aviation. Average pilots your first year, an airline, you can make about $96,000. Captains can make well over the 200s, and there are even pilots out there that can make well over $500,000. On top of that, having a great quality of life, some great benefits, and of course, helping others along the way. And I mean, seeing the whole world, right? What's better than that? So there's a lot of reasons to become a pilot, and that's what's drawn me to it. So if you have been considering becoming a pilot and don't know where to start, hands down, the best thing you can do is get a discovery flight. And basically what that means is you go to a local flight school and you meet up with a certified flight instructor or a CFI, and you hop in the plane for about an hour and basically just see how to fly a small plane and see if this is something you can get used to and something that you want to do. Because it's one thing to fly in a big old 737 or Airbus or something like that and, deal with turbulence where it's pretty minimal, but it's another thing to feel that in a little tiny plane and not know what's going on, right? So starting with your discovery flight is hands down the best just taste to see if you want to start this journey, right? Otherwise, if you just quit your job right off the bat and go to a school and start flying and without doing a discovery flight, you might regret that or hate being in a plane, or maybe you get motion sickness or something like that and realize that it's going to be a problem. So you start with a discovery flight. I would go with a ton of questions to ask your flight instructor. I'll jump to that, like those kind of questions to ask in a second when I jump into talking about a school. But that being said, ask away, right? This is a great chance to have some good one-on-one time with that flight instructor while you're up in the plane and to learn about that flight school. These typically cost about 50 to 200 bucks and anywhere in between. But it is well worth it. So to find that flight school, what you're gonna wanna do is hop on like Google or Yelp or whatever and just look up reviews for flight school. Definitely find one with the highest ratings you can, because let's be real, you wanna go somewhere that's safe, that has a good track record, and that people are raving about. Because otherwise, gosh, last thing you wanna do is be up in a plane and there's an emergency or you have a very unqualified instructor. It could be a nightmare. But that being said, a discovery flight is awesome. I still remember mine, even though it was, almost a year ago. And man, what an absolute blast. You just feel like you are on top of the world. So it's a great first taste. And if there's anything to get you pumped up into your career path of becoming a pilot, that's a great first move. So after you've done your discovery flight and you realize, hey, I'm all in on aviation, this is the path I want to pursue, before doing anything else, you absolutely need to follow this step. Go and get your medical. Basically, your medical is a physical exam where you go meet with an FAA-approved physician and basically go over your medical history and any conditions you might have, medications, just your overall health and wellness, right? You need to ensure that you can safely fly a plane up to the standard of the FAA, and you're not going to have something like a heart attack or something like that that might potentially put yourself and others at risk when you're up in the air. So it is super important to get a physical, because if you have a condition that can weed you out right from the get-go, hey, unfortunately, there goes your chances of flying. And it's unfortunate, right? And you'd hate to go through all of this training without a physical or without your medical first, where you're potentially throwing thousands of dollars away only to find out you can't fly. So it's super important you do that. Basically, there's 3 types of medicals: a first, a second, and a third class. So basically, to become an airline pilot, you want to get a first class medical. You only need your third class while you're in school, but ultimately just go ahead and get your first. It's going to be the same cost. It's not really any different of a test or exam rather, but that way you know for sure you meet the standards to become an airline pilot. Now, this is one of the more serious parts of flying, but it is hands down one of the most important. Again, going back to safety, you don't want to be up in the air and maybe you have some condition where I don't know, you pass out at the plane and you hurtle down to earth or something like that, right? Endangering yourself or others. But that being said, there are plenty of resources out there to help you if you have any other questions going into your exam, right? There's things like AME Foresight where you can anonymously ask questions prior to going into an examiner to get anything like that cleared up. Now, you don't just go to any physician to get this exam. So basically, when you're doing your discovery flight, I would ask that flight school if they have a list of examiners that you can go and check, and just go pick anyone. It doesn't really matter. Usually these are anywhere from $150 to $300. It really just depends on the examiner themselves and kind of the average market rate, but that is a cost you'll have to incur as well. But once you get that, you are ready to rock and you can begin starting flight school. So once you've done your medical and done your discovery flight, now you get into the good stuff, finding a flight school. There are a ton of flight schools out there. There are tons of different types of flight schools. I'm going to make a very in-depth video on this down the road, but for all intents and purposes, there's two main types of flight schools, a Part 61 and a Part 141. Part 61 is a little bit more of a go on your own pace. It can be a little bit cheaper and it's a little less governed, if you will. A Part 141 is a very structured curriculum, can typically be a little bit more expensive, but it is very in-depth because it's ultimately moderated by the FAA. I've actually done both schools, or at least started in one school and transitioned over to another one. There's pros and cons to both. Now, there is a lot of differences between the two, so I'm going to make a different video on that, so be on the lookout for that one. But really, the best thing I can do once you've decided if you want to go Part 61 or Part 141 is just start going to different flight schools in the area. Again, through Google or Yelp or however you find your resources, and just start calling those schools or visiting and asking a ton of questions. Because ultimately, if you're going to spend anywhere from $65,000 to $100,000, and yes, that is potentially the cost of school, you want to make sure you're going to some place that's going to meet your needs, where there's an instructor that absolutely is going to communicate with you and that you mesh with. That's ultimately going to set you up for success. So spend a ton of time on these flight schools, just asking whatever questions. I would go with a list. There's plenty of different lists and resources online where you can find some questions, but some of the main ones I would ask are, hey, what's your safety record? What does the maintenance look like for your fleet? How old or new is your fleet? What does the graduation or pass rate look like for different ratings? How many CFIs do you have? How many planes do you have? That's just a number of questions, but all are super important because ultimately you want to know things like, hey, is this place safe? Are they passing students or are people just washing out? You know, do they have enough planes to fly, or are you going to be waiting a couple hours or a couple days to fly, or weeks, or whatever the case may be, right? And that's just not going to be the best use of your time. So you really want to spend that time to just go ask those questions and pick the very best flight school for you that's going to meet your needs. The other piece on flight schools is, hey, you are the customer, right? If there's a flight school where you start attending and something's not right, or there's safety or maintenance problems, or you're just constantly getting pushed by the wayside or something like that, you're the customer. Don't be afraid to pick a new one or shop around. Ultimately, it's your life, it's your safety. And as a pilot, you need to be the one to kind of make those responsibility calls, right? You are the pilot in command. And so getting a grasp on that now and setting yourself up for success is hands down going to be the best possible thing. Same thing goes for also your CFI, right? Having a certified flight instructor. If there's one where their teaching style just doesn't mesh with you, or you're butting heads or whatever the case may be, don't be afraid to get a new one, because again, you are a paying customer. You're going to be spending a ton of money. And I mean, really, it's your right. You know, I hate to be the one to rock the boat, but at the end of the day, you're spending a ton of money to be here, and it is your career. So make sure you're setting yourself up for success and getting the best possible standard and holding others to a high standard as well. So another big step to help you set yourself up for success on your journey to become a pilot before you go to flight school is to set up your IACRA number. Basically, that's registering yourself with the FAA so you can kind of go through your ratings and enroll in school and all of that. It's a small detail, but when I was going through flight school, basically they had me set that up day one, and I was actually paying my instructor to show me how to do something I could have done online. So hey, I'm trying to save you anywhere from 60 to $100 on that CFI time by doing that. So if you go to iacra.gov, it's really easy. Just follow the steps on becoming a private pilot, and from there, just take the time to get it done, and that's going to save you a little bit of time on the front end for sure. One of the things about flight schools you'll learn is everything costs money. Aviation, again, is not cheap, but can be well worth it. But that being said, any chance you can to save yourself some money, do it. And this is one of those pro tips that's going to help you go a long, long way. So you got all the admin stuff, your medical, and figuring out a flight school out of the way. Now's the fun part, actually flying. So basically what that looks like is you're going to earn your ratings as you go through school. There's 3 to 5 ratings you're really going to need. First and foremost is going to be your private pilot rating. Next is your instrument rating. After that is your commercial rating. And then from there, there's a multi-engine add-on you typically want to get. I've heard of some places paying for that, but most people, you're going to go out of pocket and do that. The other potential rating is your CFI, your Certified Flight Instructor rating as well. Depending on the job market and what you want to do, that is going to be another path to consider. And there's a couple other ones out there as well that you can also look at. But that being said, let's get down to the basics on your ratings and learning and growing from there. So first and foremost, there's a certain amount of set flight hours that you need to reach. And that's going to be broken up into some specifics like cross-country time and some night flights and landings and instrument time. And there's all sorts of things like that that go into it. I'm going to make a separate video on the specifics of all of that because there's just so much information out there. But basically, you're going to do that. You're going to pass a written knowledge test administered by the FAA. And then you're going to go and take a check ride with an FAA examiner. And so that's basically going to be a 2-hour oral portion and a 2-hour flight portion, at least for your private pilot license. But all are super important to getting you those ratings. And then from there, you earn each, your private pilot license and each rating thereafter. And that's when the fun starts. You can do all of this with your CFI, but one piece of advice I'm going to give right now that's also going to save you a ton of money is to do an online ground school. And basically what that is it takes all of the information that you need to know and it condenses it down into one little course to help you learn and get all that knowledge so that you're not paying out of pocket for a CFI. Now you certainly could, but basically for the cost of about 2 to 3 hours with a CFI is what you get a ground school for. It's usually anywhere from, I don't know, 150 to $300 or so. But there are a lot of great resources out there. A lot of them also offer free lessons as well. So I would try a couple because there are some out there that are dated. I, for example, used Gold Seal. It's fantastic. There's some awesome instructors on there, but there's also things like Sporties, King's School, Shepherd. There's a ton of ones out there. So just look up, private pilot ground school or instrument ground school, and you'll start learning from there and seeing what that looks like. But just to name a few, those are some great resources. So doing your ground school helps prep you for your knowledge test as well as just, flying in general. You're going to need all of that knowledge. So there is also something called the PHAK, the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge. It's a big, thick textbook. That's everything you really need to know, but the ground school helps it make it a little bit more palatable and easy for you to read and understand. But there is no supplement for the PHAK as well. From there, what I would recommend is to take your knowledge test as soon as possible, or at least get that ground school knocked out and take your knowledge test maybe a quarter to halfway through your program, just so you can get all of that knowledge and apply it to practice instead of your CFI. Spending a bunch of time showing you or teaching you this rather, and you're wasting just thousands of dollars on that classroom time instead of something that you can do online or at home, right? On top of that, it's nice just having that background information while you fly, such as things like aerodynamics and weather and types of airspaces and all sorts of things like that. Super important to know that prior, or at least to set yourself up for success. And really that's my goal, right? And why I'm making these videos is I want to share those little tips and tricks with you guys so that you know the pitfalls or the things to look out for prior, so that you can have this nice seamless transition, so you can get through your ratings as soon as possible, and so that you can get to flying that plane at a major airline or whatever your end goal is much faster. So basically, get your ground school done. It's incredibly helpful. Let's talk a little bit more about the ratings themselves. There is a ton that goes into it, so I'm going to try and make a couple more videos on that, because otherwise this video would just be way too long. But to get your private pilot license, you need basically 35 to 40 hours, depending on if you're a 141 or a 61 school. Your instrument rating, you need about 40 hours. For your commercial rating, you need about 250 hours. For your multi-engine, there's actually no set time limit on that. As soon as you can pass the check ride, you're good to go. And your CFI, basically you need to have hold all of those ratings and do a couple other stipulations there. So that's kind of the basics on getting your ratings and going through flight school. Very oversimplified, but again, there's so much knowledge that goes into it. I don't want to overwhelm you with too much. But basically, let's talk about when you're in school. Here's a couple other tips and tricks I have. The first one is try and fly as much as you can. And I know that sounds way easier said than done, but it truly helps. When I first started flying, my goal was to basically fly every weekend, Saturday and Sunday, as much as I possibly could to get my ratings. Well, there's things like weather and maintenance issues and stuff like that really prevent you getting there. So I would recommend, if you can, if you're able to, do it full time. I transitioned over to that and it is a breeze. It is so much easier. But if you're only flying, 1 or 2 days a week, it makes it incredibly hard to soak up that knowledge. And you usually end up spending that next lesson, like half of it, just getting reacquainted with the plane and trying to remember those old lessons. So it is super important to fly as much as you can. You really want to shoot for flying about 3 days a week. That's the sweet spot. If you can go full time, I would highly recommend it. It just makes it that much easier to get out there and learn. Again, if you fly 1 to 2 days a week, it just makes it really hard to retain that knowledge, and you're just wasting so much time. It's tough. Now, if you can pursue aviation full time, I would highly recommend it. It just makes things a lot easier. You pick things up quicker. And of course, it's just going to stream you along a lot faster to, get to that airline role. All of it's based on seniority. So the sooner you can get there, the more it makes sense. I know some people who maybe get loans or, they work 2 jobs. If you can do that, I'd highly recommend it. Maybe don't get a loan, but just do whatever you can to pick up that flight time as soon as possible. So after you get your ratings, that's when the fun really starts. Next is time building. And so that could typically be your first job in aviation. It could be anything from towing banners to land surveying or pipeline patrol to becoming a CFI. I feel like that's the most common path. To do that, of course, you need to get your CFI rating. But hey, it's definitely an effective way to do it. And I feel like most CFIs I talk to are a little bit more apt compared to other types of aviation jobs, because let's be real, you're talking about the fundamentals every day. And that's going to set you up to be a way more successful candidate for the airliners down the road for sure. So there are a lot of paths out there. It really just depends on what you're looking for. But you want to build those hours. Another option I see a lot of people do is they might even buy a plane or go in with some friends and co-own that plane or rent or do whatever it takes to basically get to that 1,500 hour mark. So 1,500 hours is really the absolute bare minimum that you need to apply to the airlines. That's exactly what they're looking for. I guess depending on the hiring environment, it could be a little bit lower, it could be a little bit higher. I remember hearing back in the day, it used to be you needed like 3,000 or 4,000 hours, which is crazy. So going back to what I was saying, the beginning of this video, there is no better time to hop into aviation and pick up that role, because the minimums are a lot lower. And on top of that, of course, the airliners they're starting to revise those union contracts. So pilots are also getting paid more. I know United had a massive win. That's going to just do wonders for those pilots down the road. So anyway, get your hours. There's 1,000,001 ways to do it. You got to find that job, especially as you start from that low time pilot. If you pass your commercial, you have like 250 hours. So you've got a long way to go. That's going to take you about 2 to 3 years. But hey, that is just getting you one step closer to that job at the airlines. So once you hit your 15 hours, it's go time. From what I've seen, you can start applying for roles anywhere from 12 to 1300 hours, maybe a little bit lower. And as you go through the interview process, of course, you're going to start getting closer to your 1500. And maybe you'll get that contingent job offer of, hey, you need your 1500 before you can start working, or the case may be. Of course, that's all going to be entirely dependent on who you're working for and what their requirements are. But basically, you go through the interview process, you land that job, and from there, you get your class date and you start flying, or at least learning how to fly for the airlines. Some people generally go to a regional airline first, so think something like SkyWest or one of those smaller local airlines. That typically seems to be the starting path, just so you can build that multi-engine time and all those other requirements that the major airlines need. Maybe you do that for a couple of years, and from there you go to American or United or Delta or whatever the major airlines are that you're thinking of. I think it just depends on the hiring environment of whether you can go directly from 1500 hours to that major airline spot. But to be realistic on expectations, plan on going to a regional first. I think that's the general industry trend, and it makes a ton of sense. Now, once you get to the airlines, there is one more rating or certification to get, and that's going to be your ATP or Airline Transport Pilot Certification. Essentially, this is the highest certification that you can get as a pilot, and it's actually required by law to become a commercial pilot or work as like a charter captain. So, like any other FAA rating, you're going to have to pass a written test and you're going to have to pass a check ride. Some other requirements are you need to be at least 23 years of age and have 1500 hours, and that's broken up by a combination of things like nighttime and solo time and pilot and command time and a couple other stipulations like that, similar to any other ratings. Now, that 23 years of age is also an important piece because, hey, if you're under 23, that means you can't quite get a job at the airlines just yet. The beauty of this rating, though, is that typically your employer is going to pay for it. The beauty of that is it's taken care of. Now, there are some people who will pay out of pocket for this to make themselves more competitive in this hiring landscape. And hey, that's a possibility. You are more than welcome to do it. But shoot, if the airline is out there paying for you to do it, I'd highly recommend to just take that money and run. Of course, there's some stipulations. And I think if you leave over a certain amount of time, you have to pay a portion of it back. So take a look at your contract and whatever you're signing as a term of employment, rather. But that being said, hey, once you're there, that is it. That is the last rating you're going to have to get, and you are good to go. But from there, start flying, you start collecting those nicer paychecks. You are running the show, right? You are flying for hire, you're flying passengers, you're seeing the world, and building those hours to get to the major airlines and really just having that aviation career that you've dreamed of. So that's it, guys. That is all the steps from start to finish. I went in depth on some a little bit longer. There's some other ones that are a little bit shorter. Be on the lookout for more videos from me. If you like the content, let me know. If there's any questions you have or any other topics you want to see, please write it in the comments. Otherwise, give me a like, follow this channel. Be on the lookout for more videos from me. Otherwise, I'm going to see you guys on the path to becoming a pilot.